Well, thank you again for being here this morning. I know it's wet and cold and a holiday weekend, so I'm just glad to share this time with you. So first, let us pray. God of compassion and grace, thank you again for your presence. Thank you for those who are living with HIV/AIDS, those who are at risk of HIV, and those who care about HIV and AIDS. Help them to know that their caring comes from a place within that deeply feels, deeply experiences, and deeply loves. And help us to remember that every act of care and love, no matter how large or small, is a work of peace. Bless them for caring, loving, and therefore sowing peace in this world, and help us to be faithful to what you ask us to do, and teach us to use love and compassion to overcome the world. So in your many names we pray. Amen. We live in a completely interdependent world, which means that we're not separate from one another. How we respond to HIV and AIDS depends in part on whether or not we understand this interdependence. HIV/AIDS is not someone else's issue. It belongs to us all. These were words from former President Bill Clinton, and they tell us a truth that still affects our lives today. And whether or not you are diagnosed with HIV, we are all living with HIV and AIDS. So I wanted to give you 3 images that tell you a little bit about what the global perspective on HIV/AIDS is right now. 35 million people worldwide are currently living with HIV/AIDS. The vast majority of people living with HIV are in low and middle income countries, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. And 3.2 million children worldwide are living with HIV. And most of these children were infected by their HIV-positive mothers during pregnancy, childbirth, or breastfeeding. And while these statistics are better than they used to be in the past, HIV and AIDS is not yet over in our world. And these images and these statistics tell us about the work that still needs to be done worldwide. For more than 30 years of my life, I've been involved in HIV/AIDS, working to serve people who are living with it and to work to prevent the further spread of HIV. My connection to that work began at MCC Dallas when I was a young student clergy serving on the staff of the church, and at that time when HIV/AIDS first appeared in Dallas, and my first experience of it was with someone who came to the church for help. At that time we also had a president in this country who would not even acknowledge the words or that HIV and AIDS existed. But we learned something important in that time. And that was that whatever was going to get done, we had to do it ourselves. And that's part of the reason I included the reading from the modern lesson in our service today. So let's listen to those words again in this perspective. In his writing entitled Why We Can't Wait, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. responded to those who told him to be patient, that Christianity would eventually win equal rights for African Americans. And this is part of how he answered that. Such an attitude stems from a tragic misconception of time, from the strangely irrational notion that there is something in the very flow of time that will inevitably cure all its ills. Actually, time is neutral itself. It can be used either destructively or constructively. And more I feel that people of ill will have used time more constructively than people of good will. We will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the hateful words and actions of bad people, but for the appalling silence of good people. Human progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts of men and women being willing to be co-workers with God. And without this hard work, time itself becomes an ally of the forces of social stagnation, and we must use time creatively in the knowledge that it is always the right time to do what is right. Now, although Dr. King spoke of this in terms of the struggle for African Americans, like so many times, his words were prophetic and held deep truths for all people who struggle for equality or basic human rights and dignity and respect as fellow human beings with all other human beings, regardless of who they are or what are their circumstances. So one of the things that I am thankful for today is Dr. King's teaching. Because for me, embracing those truths became a driving force for me, became a mantra that helped me shape my theology and compelled me to begin using my life to work in HIV/AIDS. And so for the past 16 years, I have served in the role of the Executive Director of AIDS Interfaith Network, which is now a 30-year-old HIV/AIDS service organization. Now, some of you have volunteered there, especially to provide a meal on the weekend through a program we call Saturday Night Live at the Dare Center. So, and I think there are some of you here who may be participating in next Saturday's meal event, I think. Yes? Okay. You had in your handouts today a one-page handout. Derek, were we able to get that? Yeah. Not such a great picture, but it's better on paper today. I didn't get it sent to Eric, and we tried to snapshot it this morning. I just wanted you to have that because it's an abstract that on each side that describes AIDS Interfaith, our programs, our core values, and our theological statement. But what I want you to get from that is that we're just one organization, and we, through our direct client service programs, serve 2,000 men, women, and children who have HIV and AIDS. And through our HIV prevention programs, we reach 10,000 people who are at risk of contracting HIV. Of the 2,000 that we serve who are diagnosed, more than half of them, over 60%, are African Americans. Almost 1/3 of them, nearly 30%, are women, and they are especially African American women. And over half of the diagnosed people that we serve are over the age 50, with half of that group being over 60. And astoundingly, 1/4 or 25% of our clients have been living with HIV/AIDS for 21 years or more. I'm thankful for that this year because there was a time through in all of this history that wouldn't have been true. We had a few days, a few weeks, or a few months to try to help people get something to happen. But now, we're much more about being able to help people live with that. Now, in the prevention part of the agency, we reach 10,000 people who are at risk. And we especially reach the Hispanic population, and most of them are Mexicans who are living in the United States, and they're seeking services at the Mexican consulate in Dallas. 60% of the 10,000 people we reach overall are men and boys. 40% are women and girls. And all of them are highly at risk of HIV infection. So I wanted to show you 3 more slides that tell you a little bit about HIV and AIDS in the U.S. nationwide. Gay and bisexual men of all races are the most severely affected by HIV. 1 million people are living with HIV in the United States. 1 in 8 living with HIV are unaware that they're infected. And about 1 in 4 new HIV infections is among youth, ages 13 to 24. Most of them do not know they're infected, are not getting treated, and can unknowingly pass the virus on to others. Those are some tough things to consider. And these statistics, believe it or not, are also better than it's been in the past. But they tell us that HIV and AIDS is not over, and again, it helps define what the work is that needs to be done. of all the people we reach or serve at AIDS Interfaith, whether they're diagnosed or whether they're at risk of HIV, 60% are gay or bisexual. 30% of the men, women, girls, and boys we reach are between the ages of 13 and 24. And the AIDS Interfaith has a dual focus of serving both those who already have HIV and AIDS, and we work to prevent the further spread of it through prevention programs. Can we have the third? There we go. And although we're a smaller agency, we have a broad reach, and we're aligned with the national efforts intended to bring about the end of HIV and AIDS. And after 30 years, we are entering our 30th year right now here at Thanksgiving. We're still here, and I'm truly thankful for that, because we're still able to do the work, still able to serve, still out there trying to make a difference. And I've always been very proud of our theological position, and you'll see it on the back of one of the handout that you have, but here's an excerpt from it. We believe that HIV/AIDS is one disease among many and is part of the human condition in which we all participate. AIDS is not God's punishment for any behavior. There is no litmus test to qualify for compassion. We all share a supreme connection to one another in our living and dying, which binds us in a fellowship of hope and healing to one another, and especially to those of us who suffer. Any illness represents the opportunity for love, mercy, and compassion to be present through the lives of families, friends, neighbors, and caregivers. And guess what, my friends? You and I are the families, neighbors, friends, and caregivers. And when something needs to be done, we must be the ones who do it. In the past, even as we held our brothers and sisters in the last days of their lives, and we felt the loss of a whole generation of people, our vision needed to remain firmly set on a better day, on a day when no more lives would be permanently changed by or lost to HIV and AIDS. And we believe that there are just powerful lessons that we can learn from the seasons of lost lives and the moments of physical survival. And in this day, we continue to search for those deeper truths about HIV and AIDS. And we know that HIV and AIDS cannot be relegated to a simple physical condition. It's never been about the body alone. HIV/AIDS is a condition of the body, mind, and spirit. And the story of HIV and AIDS continues to span the fullness of our humanity, the journey from remembrance to inspiration, from death to survival, from our capacity to harm one another with stigma and shame, all the way to our capacity to be forces of healing and compassion and grace. HIV and AIDS is the battleground on which hope can be lost or nurtured. And it is World AIDS Day that speaks that message to us, because, again, it touches something deep within us and awakens a spirit within us. December 1st is World AIDS Day, and the spirit that is alive, is enlivened in us through this experience is the spirit that empowers us to be the family, friends, neighbors, and caregivers to the generations of people living with HIV and AIDS. We've done that. We are doing that. Others will do it after us. And for this, for you, I am truly thankful. Mother Teresa taught us that every act of compassion or kindness is an act of love, and every act of love, no matter how large or small, is an act of peace. She understood that the message that Jesus taught us in the Sermon on the Mount from the Beatitudes, that the passage that was in our gospel reading from today, from Matthew 5, she understood that message and embraced it. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. And this, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." That's you and me, friends. The Sermon on the Mount takes place in the early part of Jesus' ministry and is the longest piece of teaching of Jesus in the New Testament. It's a collection of sayings and teachings where Jesus emphasizes the moral teachings about the dominion of God. The Lord's Prayer, even that we recited earlier in this service, is from this set of teachings. And in this day and time when we hear so much about Christian belief, Christian faith, Christian actions, we need to look back at passages such as this, the Beatitudes, which contain, we believe, the central tenets of Christian discipleship and the ethics that are central to Christianity. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. This is a test for us in today's world in how we approach issues such as immigration or other religious beliefs and the suffering that we see in the world. And after more than 30 years, it is a test for us to see how we treat the whole issue of HIV and AIDS and those who have it. Every act of compassion and kindness is an act of love, and every act of love, no matter how small, is an act of peace. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. World AIDS Day calls us and challenges us to open ourselves to the potential for pain or grief so that we embrace the full circle of life. But to do that, knowing that when we emerge, we're better, stronger, wiser, and more willing to continue to bring the message to the rest of the world. World AIDS Day calls us to the mission and purpose of doing something about HIV and AIDS by helping us embrace with remembrance and welcome the future with longing. And that time is now. From the experience of World AIDS Day, as you go through these next few days and whatever you take part in, let no more time pass without being involved in HIV and AIDS in some way and getting others to do that also. Encourage everyone to leave behind judgment, stigma, exclusion, fear, homophobia, shame, whatever it is, leave it behind and become part of the families, friends, neighbors, and caregivers who are all about survival, inspiration, healing, compassion, and hope. Life presents us so many challenges, but our faith presents us so many options. Let's hear again part of the piece from Deuteronomy that we heard earlier that Cheryl read, Reverend Cheryl. Today I offer you choices. My command is for you to love me and to be obedient to my will as I love and bless you. This day I set before you life and death. Choose life. Now, from an initial reading of the passage, it seems to state the obvious that we all want, and that's to live. And unless we find ourselves in some type of dire circumstances, the urge and desire to live, to survive, is stronger and overcomes any other desires in our life. But the choice in this passage is not just about mere existence. It's not talking about simply a decision to exist or to live. But really, it is rather talking about religious practices and about what all life involves. It is about us being obedient to God's will and ways for our lives. As God said, my command is for you to love me and to be obedient to my will as I love and bless you. In this passage is encompassed a whole person experience involving our hearts, the seat of our intelligence and conscience, as well as our bodies. To love God is to not purely have an intellectual or emotional experience. And choosing life involves more. It involves a commitment to be and to do. To be and to do. And remember that HIV/AIDS is a condition of the mind, body, and spirit. This passage teaches us how to love God with our whole selves, to follow God's voice as we walk, and to embrace the commandments that help us on our way. By doing these things, we choose life. And this is the way to life, not to death. Choosing life brings us the opportunity for healing and instills hope. This is about the Spirit that empowers us again to be families, friends, neighbors, and caregivers to generations of people living with HIV and AIDS. And in this lesson, we hear the echo of Jesus' teachings, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." Saint Teresa of Avila taught us that God has no body now on earth but yours, no hands but yours, no feet but yours. You are the eyes through which God's compassion is to look out on the earth. You are the feet by which God is to go about doing good. And yours are the hands by which God is to bless us now. World AIDS Day challenges us to embrace the fact that HIV and AIDS is not over and needs us to be willing to do the work that's needed to be done. It is my faith that makes this possible for me to do and has sustained me in working in HIV and AIDS for more than 30 years. I believe that the time is now for all of us. You and I must become co-workers with God, the co-workers that Dr. King spoke of. You and I are called to be God's hands, feet, eyes, and heart in our world, to use our love and our lives to show compassion in serving others, and to recognize that our acts of love are acts of peace. You and I must be the peacemakers in our time, and let us give thanks that we are able to be that and to do that. You and I are the peacemakers. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Amen.